guys, welcome back to 52 Lockup. I am your Apple Teenie Cadma of Bit and Apple TV. 52 Lockup is a series I started to talk about one of my biggest passions, which is true crime. So a new episode on every Cadmaniac Monday for 52 Mondays is 52 Crimes. Hope you guys enjoy. Be sure to give me some comment, feedback, tell me what you like, subscribe, give me some feedback. And let's get started. By the way, I just got back from Dallas. Loved it out there. You guys are so fabulous to me. I can't wait to go back. But yeah, let's get started with today's episode. So today's episode begins with Tara Lynn Grant. She was actually born as Tara D. Strap. Hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. She was born on June 28th, 1972 in Perkins, Michigan, to her parents Mary and Gerald. Her father was actually known as Dusty. That was his nickname. She also had a sister named Alicia, who came around like 3 years later, so she was 3 years younger than her. Her mother, Mary, was considered to be like a very steady, religious kind of like type of woman. She kept her home like completely spotless. Mary, her mom, was a big fan of like tradition, and she also happened to be a dental hygienist. So her father, Dusty, on the other hand, he was a utility worker at the K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in Gwynn. Tara was described as like ambitious, like from a very, very young age. And whatever she wanted, people knew like she was going to achieve what she wanted. Both of the sisters did attend public school, like Mid-Penn High School, where she was described to be like an exceptional student, athlete, cheerleader. She was a former basketball player. I mean, she was the golden standard for like all schools, right? She was goal oriented. She knew what she wanted. She was in every team, like that kind of thing. This was that kind of girl, like the one you just pick out of the TV box, right? This was a young lady who was really planning on going places, right? She had the ambition to do so. She was described as a bright light to others. That at least that's what one of her one-time teachers said about her. Her teacher's name was Mary Brayan. She said that she was one of those students that when you got home for the night that you woke up the next day and it made you want to come back to school and keep teaching. Like she actually motivated her teachers. Tara was, remembered in such a very profound and remarkable way. One of the other things that she was also remembered for is that she was very much like her father, Dusty, that both of them had a short fuse. So when she did become a teenager, her and her father used to bump heads. But they still remained to be close. Like everyone just understood, they just bumped heads. He was strong-willed, she was strong-willed. Apple didn't fall too far from the tree, right? They still went out together for their hunting trips, like to go for like hunting for rabbits on the weekend. And apparently, Tara was so loquacious that her parents would reward her for not talking in school. She graduated high school like third of her class. She was raised that she could achieve anything she wanted. She had a support system in that sense. However, her temper gained her nicknames like Terror or the Terrible, Tara the Terrible, when she began dating Jamie Hansen from high school as she continued into her 2-year program at Badenoch Community College. Her temper would sort of really show itself, right? She would unleash it on her boyfriend or whoever, and she didn't really care who was there, was there to witness it. Like once she apparently bursted into her boyfriend's home, Jamie, in front of his parents and scolded him like in front of his parents. She was described as likable, but still having to have things like her way, right? It had to be her way. Her relationship with Jamie was kind of like an on and off again kind of relationship. Everyone knows a couple that's like that, right? After they were kind of over, Tara was invited to be a bridesmaid at her friend Amy's wedding, where she met this guy named Scott Submarine. In the fall of like 1992, they hit it off, but it didn't really go anywhere because he had to finish school elsewhere. She was working on her own goals, so it lasted about 6 months. And then for the next few years, she focuses on her schooling. Let's wind up around to hubby. That would be Stefan Grant. So Stefan Grant was born as Stefan Christopher Grant. Something about those triple names, right? was born January 18th, 1970 in Michigan, to his parents, Susan and William. William was known as Al. I'm not sure where all these nicknames are coming from because I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to continue. His sister Kelly was born in 1967. He loved to build floats and he liked to ride them down the river that were like by his house with his friend, Ken McCauley. And, the floats were often poorly constructed. They were kids. They just wanted to have fun, pretending they were like surfing across the river, that kind of thing. He actually met his friend, Ken, when Ken moved into their family's new home, like in Riverland Drive in 1977. And they just hit it off. I mean, Steve apparently had a stuttering problem, which over time he kind of like ebbed it over. But the two of them had like a really tight bond. And both of his parents were described to have had like heavy cigarette smoking habits. They played tennis and he worked hard. Like they loved each other and their kids. And it's kind of just how they're described. In memory, Stephen's family were also described as kind of like the traditional fairy tale, right? When his family, like, they had a boy and a girl, they had a black lab named Princess and Poodle that they nicknamed, like, BJ, short for Blackjack, don't get smart with me. William, aka Al, was a successful entrepreneur. He, like, sold, he was, like, a supplier of, like, tools and stuff like that for the auto industry, which is always a booming business. Unfortunately, the magic between his parents and that perfect little household was not always going to last. So the family moved to Riverdale in 1971, right? So by 1978, Susan, his mom, she's like, I'm out. I can't. I'm done. She cited in her thing that it was just a breakdown in the marriage. There was nothing else explained in the paper, just like breakdown in marriage. So the family separates temporarily, and then they go back to Riverland, and they get back together again, trying to like work it out, right? So Stephen is dealing with all that, but he's also still described as like a very energetic kid. He's curious, he's fun-loving, but he's still impulsive, right? Even before he was allowed to drive, he would, and had his license, he would actually take his mother's car out for like a spin when she wasn't around. And again, kicking into that impulsiveness, right? His father, Al, though, was an avid hunter, right? He loved bow and arrows, like he was all for it. And apparently his father used to make his own shotgun shells. These would be the perfect supplies that Stephen would need in order to make things like, firecrackers. Apparently, growing up, because of this all encouraged Stefan's creativity. So in May of 1984, he made a device with a long copper tube, tightly packed with gunpowder, buckshot, capped it with a fuse coming out on one end, and basically he made a bomb. Yep, made his own little bomb. He ran to his friend's Ken house. He's like, you gotta check this out. Look what the hell I just made. Now they're like, this is fucking awesome. And then they decide they're gonna search for a place to light it. They decide Ken's backyard would be perfect. He blew a hole in the lawn about like 8 inches wide and 6 inches deep. Shrapnel went everywhere, right? His father sees the hole the next day and is like, what happened? So Stefan denies it. He just goes, I was home alone, and like there were 2 people like lurking in our backyard. He's a teenager, keep this in mind, right? So the police end up actually picking up his friend Ken, and Ken's like, whoa, Steve's the one that showed up at my place with the bomb. I didn't even make it. Like, like at this point, you can see I don't think they're gonna be friends for much longer. So, as stated in this book that's called A Slaying in the Suburbs, it's dedicated to this particular crime, a police report concluded that Stefan's only explanation for not telling his father immediately was because he was waiting until his father had discovered the hole in the backyard and was like, I'm making my ass beat. So that kind of thing. Because he had been in trouble numerous times, as it was. So he was afraid of what would happen for the repercussions for his actions, right? And his friend Ken stated that it was a case where all Stefan had to do was just apologize and then just tell the truth. But he was like, nah. Ken pointed out that Stefan liked his fiction. Fiction always worked better. He'd rather tell an elaborate story more than anything else. That's key, right? Afterwards, Stefan ends up, wanting to live up his excitement. He gets caught shoplifting for a remote control airplane at Circus World. Apparently shoplifting was one of his personal favorite hobbies. But by his teenage age, you know, like by the time he became a teenager, he was showing like a big interest in like stealing weaponry, like his grandfather's military weapons that his grandfather had in the home. And then his friend Ken noticed that he had a weird habit of like burying things and then unburying them, like to take them out again. Like a machine gun that he took from his grandfather's home. He actually told everyone in school about it and then went back, unburied it, and then reburied it in another place. I guess that's important for later on. As a teenager, he carried around a .32 pistol with him everywhere because it made him like look cool. But apparently he never targeted animals or people. But everything else was fair game, like your mailbox, right? He did whatever he could to get attention by causing the mayhem, right? And the fighting between his parents began to increase, and he's still going through all these changes. He hated it. He hated the fact that they were fighting, but eventually the parents came down to a divorce, right? So, now it's 1988. Stefan enrolled into Macomb Community College for their 2-year programs. But in 1989, he was still pulled over while he's in college because apparently he had a gun, in the car when he was pulled over, and he didn't have a permit for it, so he was arrested. So, now we're up to 1991. He realized he wanted to become a teacher. He's going to become a straight hour, right? So, he's continuing with his 2-year program. And after the program is done, he decides he wants to attend Michigan State University. At first, he worked at Denny's, where he would continue his fabricated stories of coming from money, because, you know, people with money work at Denny's. And how he had sports car and how he raced his Mazda. Like, he needed to be the cool person. He needed to always be, like, the one that everyone could be jealous of. Like, that was very, very important, right? He begins dating this girl named Dina Hardy, a childhood friend, and they went everywhere. And the truth is, everyone actually expected those two to get married. You know, but the problem was apparently they couldn't live together, so they broke it off in 1993. But she's important later. Stefan refocused himself into politics. He worked as an intern at the office of State Senator Jack Faxon. He wanted to secure his part-time, you know, like student position through Michigan State University. He's like, I got this. So by 1994, Steve was actually a legislative aide answering the phones at Faxon's office across from the state capitol, and he was very well trusted by the senator. Faxon ended his political career because he had started in 1964, and he was like, oh, okay. I'm done. Like, that was his thing. So when that happened, Stephen's job kind of ended. It didn't have to, but he just ended it from there. That's the summer of 1994 where he met Tara. Now, Stefan was very interested in her, but she wasn't necessarily responding. She had said she was still kind of dealing with her on and off again relationship with Jamie Hansen, her high school sweetheart. But Stefan was very determined to see if she would give him a chance. This goes on for quite some time. When they finally did begin dating, kind of, sort of, maybe, the family had no idea he existed. So she was still taking it slow and still focusing on her goals, on what she wanted to accomplish. And 6 weeks after they were starting to date, or getting to know each other, her paternal grandmother passed away. Stefan popped up at the funeral unannounced, and kind of just was there, appeared, and then just disappeared. Tara's sister, Alicia, thought that was kind of weird, because nobody knew who he was. Tara specifically told her sister that she did not invite Stefan, because she didn't think he was going to go, but it was also just something that was also very new. Stefan was very persistent about Tara, which is one of the reasons why he showed up, right? She wasn't really sure about what she wanted to do with the relationship. He was like, no, I have to have her, done. But according to, Stefan, because he had that mindset of like, I have the right woman, like, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer, that's what pushed him to go to the funeral. So when he was there, he did tend to the family dinner and introduced himself as the boyfriend. Not her, he did. Which seemed odd to the family because, again, they didn't know who he was, had never heard of him. Honestly, it seems like he was going to force his way into her life regardless of what she may or may not have wanted. As a side note, it's not fair to both parties if someone has to force themselves into another person's life. But it is common for this to happen, especially with females, due to the structure of society where a woman will be worn down into a relationship or sex. If someone is not sure about being with you, leave them be. Like, there are plenty of people on the planet. So, I digress. But due to Stefan's abrupt appearance at the funeral, it kind of caused this issue between Tara and Jamie. Oh, did I sneeze that bullshit? Because it caused an issue, like, he apparently intentionally comforted her in front of Jamie to, like, cause a complete break between the two of them, right? And of course he was there at the funeral because he'd known her since high school. And it seems to me like Stefan was just marking his territory. He's introducing himself to the family as the boyfriend instead of letting her do it. Like, on her time, letting her decide. He's pushing his way through. And because he had did that, it pushed the relationship to where they were to get an apartment together. Tara completed college. Stefan did not. Apparently he was like 20 credits shy of getting his bachelor's and he just didn't do it. They end up moving to Detroit, which Tara was a little resistant to. But he told, you gotta think big. You gotta think big. And she did. She dreamt big and she lived big. He didn't. Tara landed a job as a Kelly girl at an established engineering firm in Troy called Morrison Knudsen, which later became Washington Group International. Now, this is a firm that provides like integrated engineering, construction, and management to businesses and governments. Now, the company was actually originally founded in Idaho of 1964, and over time became bigger, and bigger, right? So while Tara's success was continuing to grow, Steve ended up joining his father at the small tool and die shop in Mount Clemens, where he fought for his wage, basically. So, regardless of this, the two of them get married on September 28th, 1996. The wedding is remembered in two different ways. So now if you ask Tara's side of the family, right? Tara's friend Amy, who made her the bridesmaid, remember when she met the other guy, she remembered Stefan as a jerk, right? Tara's friends and family saw that the two of them were like a mismatch. This was not, they didn't think it was going to work at all. Tara, they saw to be too strong-willed, and they described him as very moody and very like someone who's out giving incessant orders to people, like he's a drill sergeant, like needing to be in charge but not really. Like, it was weird to them, right? And then apparently he was too loquacious for their liking, and the way how it was seemed to be described to me is that he was a person who needed to say something, not because he has something to say. Tara was someone who has something to say and didn't speak unless she has something to say. So anyways, they end up meeting about like a few months later on. He has another opportunity to impress her friends. Doesn't work 10 months later. But if you ask Steven's sister, Kelly, she's like, everything was great. What do you mean? It was fine. Everything was fine. It was good. They didn't, Tara's friends and family didn't like his pretentious attitude. They didn't like the fact that he was constantly trying to manipulate how they perceived him. He had to seem like a big shot, Mr. Big Shot. Like, that was him. He had to be like in there, right? A year later of them being together, friends and family noticed that Tara was picking up more of his, I need to impress others kind of personality at her sister's wedding. It was just, yeah. So she was talking about her new car, her accomplishments, and she didn't come off like she was talking about it. She came off like she was trying to like rub it in her sister's face, like, which everyone thought was weird, like, yo, back off, it's your sister's wedding, but she just needed to talk about this. And it's weird because in her diary, as she wrote, for as long as I can remember, I hear my mom telling stories about she wasn't good enough for her mom, and for as long as I can remember, I have always felt in competition with my sister. This is like an anime moment. Hold on. I felt I wasn't good enough. I've always been striving for the attention, recognition I thought my sister was always getting. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to bring livelihood to it. I'm also hyper right now at the moment, so I hope you can deal with it. But whenever she would try to like rekindle with her friends and stuff like that, and hang out with them, they noticed that the only thing she ever cared about was like the label and not the item, like how it looked on her. She just needed to like look rich. That's what was important to her, right? some friends thought her life was okay. Others noticed these little changes, in her as well as their relationship, right? A friend of Tara, her name is Diana, actually noticed that Tara liked the fact that Stefan would bypass the law at times. Like, he would break the law a little bit. She liked that about him. But in between their on and off, like, hangouts, Tara continued to become, like, a rising star at her company, right? So she's starting to make a little bit more money. She's starting to travel. But then she has her first daughter, Lindsay, in November 2000. And because of that, they were like, we should get a bigger house, right? So some of Tara's friends, by this point now, because it's hangouts and children, they don't like Stefan. They were like, Tara's good, Lindsay's good. Yeah, we don't like him. They felt he was too manipulative, right? And he needed to, again, that control of how he was, like, perceived. Like, Mr. Big Stuff, tell me. Like, that was his thing. They were like, we're not here for it. Tara was doing good. I mean, she bought 2 new cars. She had the baby. She's paying for food on the table. I mean, she was the breadwinner. And this is important because Stefan has already demonstrated he has a big ego. And in a toxic patriarchy, it could make him feel less than, right? Instead of being happy at the success of his family, right? This could be important for later on, or, I mean, we'll figure, we'll get to that, right? So eventually the couple moved into their Westridge home in 2001. That brought them part of the Carriage Hills subdivision board, where eventually Stefan became president of, and he apparently took it very, very seriously. Hope you're catching my drift. However, it was recalled by the former neighbors to describe that he had a short fuse and he took it very seriously. 2002, a year later, they had their first boy, Ian, who was born just as healthy as his sister, except he had a heart murmur. Now Tara's making 6 figures. She's traveling all over the world, right? But when she was home, it was family time, right? Stefan's a stay-at-home dad. Tara's loyal to her job. But over time, Stefan started to talk about missing his wife, right? He's lonely. He misses her. And eventually later on, the family ends up selling their home in 2001 to a couple, the Horns, right? Because they're still trying to figure things out. However, because they had sold their home to the Horns, there was a discrepancy about the permits. And there was a law case, and the Horns won the small case. And apparently this couple was pissed. So instead of just paying the Horns the $2,000 that they owed them because of what happened, they decided as a couple that they were going to intentionally make these people pay and make their lives as miserable as possible. And then in 2002, Stefan sued a guy named Kevin Bilske from a traffic accident and wanted $25,000 due to injuries that he obtained from the accident, but then it was proven in court that he obtained those injuries because he wasn't wearing his seatbelt, and then he settled for $12,000. So in the midst of all this, they're being very greedy, they're being very successful, and then they have these little random pop-up problems, pop-up problems, pop-up problems. It's very, very weird. Because as you're like reading about them, you're like, they just go from one thing, like it's strange. But I digress. The couple seemed to turn more into those kind of individuals that were willing to step on others because they needed to feel validated by stepping on others, right? They need to feel like they're better than others. They need to feel like they're living their lives better. I mean, the truth is the couple could very easily be mistaken for being conceited. Okay, so here's the thing. They're showing traits of narcissism together, right? But here's the difference. A conceited person is the extreme pride, right? They're overconfident, right? But narcissism is separated by the deeper feelings of insecurity that drives the need for attention and admiration, right? That's the difference. A person can be conceited without being a narcissist, but a narcissist will always have the traits of a conceited person. The flowers look similar, but they're different. So because of this, again, you see this little stuff, right? Tara's work calls her more and more and more. So eventually she ends up hiring a hot young teenage blonde to help with her kids when she's not there. Her friends were like, don't do that. Her name was Verena. Her name is important later when it gets really hectic. And apparently in the background, while all this is happening, Stefan would call his good old ex-girlfriend, Dina, remember that name? He would call her every year in January and be like, hey, still married? But apparently in 2007, he was actually trying to meet up with her and then ended up backing out of it at the last minute. He confessed to Dina that he thought Tara was having an affair, but he knew it wasn't sexual because the guy was too old. It was like a very strange conversation. But then later on, he finds emails between Tara and an ex-boyfriend, Pete, that was very clear that they were sexual at some point, but it could have been in the past. But then again, these emails were also 2 years old. Like, it's very, very strange because there's a lot of like bochinche happening between these two, and I hope you're keeping up. It seems like by 2007, the couple's relationship was just strained by Tara's success and also being apart from the family and the little hidden innuendos that they kept hiding from each other, right? Which tells me there's no communication in them, right? So outside of this, no one knew they had problems. They were like, everything's great. They look so happy. What do you mean? They're like, there was no knowledge that Stefan had ever been physically abusive towards her, or Tara being abusive. Like, there was none of that, right? So according to Pete, he said that Tara had confided in him that there were some financial issues, right, in the marriage, right, trust issues, right, due to their money. And it turns out that Stefan's machine shop, right, had a major problem, and Tara had just gotten a bonus from work, which she was super excited about, and he made her take her $40,000 and use it on his shop. So instead of spending their time together for Christmas and New Year's, she decided to dip out and tell him, oh yeah, I'm going to work, and then she was planning a getaway with Pete, which ended up falling apart at the last minute. I will tell you right now, if you don't know this, money will destroy a relationship. I mean, especially when you don't have communication going, it will destroy your relationship. However, anyway, back to what I was saying, the rendezvous never happened. Steve ends up coming across a holiday card addressed to someone else from Tara. This kind of just trickles in with the spiraling, right? He asked her about it, and she confessed, and he told her to leave the house, and she did. But he made sure to get Pete's number before she left, and then he called Pete and told him, I'll shoot you. I will kill you. Stefan confessed to Verena, the teenager, about what was going on, how he told her about Dina. He goes, oh, but I told, he told her the same thing he told her as Dina, that he didn't want to ruin his kid's life by getting a divorce. I apologize. I messed up the story. But Stefan mentions about what happened between him and Tara. So he's like, what if I get the guy beaten up? And, and Tara deserves a swift kick in the butt. And then he's just venting. And then he tells Verena, I want to sleep with you. Now, the teenager kind of just laughed it off, and she just changed the topic because she didn't take him seriously. He stayed in her room for the next few hours, telling her how beautiful she is, complimenting her, and blah, blah, blah. Now, this is the problem, right? They were supposed to be taking care of this young girl, and she's supposed to be there to take care of their kids. Verena's like a child to him, and she's obviously not immediately interested, but he lingers. He wanted something from her, and I think it's more about to hurt his wife. There was no place for Verena involved in their marriage. Him and Tara should have solved it out, separately. He spent the whole night complimenting her and her legs, and then some, with, no regard of her disinterest to do so. And it's a common thing, honestly, for males to coerce a woman into sex knowing she's not actually interested. He backed off the next day going, oh, I thought you would have ran. But again, she didn't take it seriously because she's 19, 18 years old. She's like, oh, he's not serious. Not really thinking much of it, right? Later on, Verena sees the couple have a long embrace. She thinks things work out, so she leaves it on. But slowly, keeps egging at Verena in any way that makes her feel good and makes her want to lean in his direction, right? So she begins to feel flattered, but she's continuing her schooling. He starts sending her discreet emails, and he's like, you know what I'm thinking about. And eventually they do sleep together, right? So she tells him this is wrong. He corrects her. It's not. Verena says she felt guilty, and especially doing anything behind Tara's back because she considered it to be not fair, because there was no absolute reason why she would ever want to hurt Tara. The girl is 19 years old. It's usually the age someone would try to groom someone so young, right? But again, she also had a purpose, which was to piss off his wife underneath it all. Revenge cheating, right? We're back to that. Verona was still stunned by the fact that Steve had no regard for his wife, right? And she was also afraid that Tara may find out, right? She asked him, you don't regret anything, do you? And he's like, it's not always right or wrong. And it doesn't always seem black and white. Now, later on, he ends up telling her, he stumbles into her room on purpose and tells her, I love you. And one morning, Verena was in his bed, and her alarm clock went off. She went to go cut it off and went back to his bed to go back to sleep. And then one of the kids came looking for her, and it was the first time Stefan panicked. Didn't stop him though. So here's where it starts to get like a little weird, right? So Stefan agreed one particular night, like, hey, I need you not to text me that much because Tara is going to be coming home. This is in February, right? This affair has been going back and forth. And Verena agrees because she doesn't want her friends to find out because she said they're becoming suspicious of who she was texting. And Tara comes home, and she ends up telling Honey Bunny that she's going on another trip. Like, she's out. She's leaving. Like, she's not even going to stick around, right? So the conversation turns into an argument. And he asked her, are you fucking your supervisor? She's like, fuck off, right? And he really wanted her to stay home, right? Which is the key, which is why I think it's so wrong what he did to Verena, because he really, at the end of the day, he's just using her, and that's not right. Because she serves more of a purpose to piss off his wife, right? So now here's where the story continues to just spiral out of craziness. So they're in this argument. The couple starts to deal blows to each other, right? And I mean fists. We're throwing fists, right? The kids are in the next room sleeping. So apparently when Tara punched him, she had left a scratch on the side of his nose that was about like an inch long. So because of this, he lunges at her, hits her, just right on the side of the neck from what he remembers, knocked the wind out of her. She fell back, hits the back of her head. Tara yells, that's it! I'm gonna take the kids. You're gonna be fucking homeless. You're a piece of shit. Right? So when she begins to get up off the floor, he starts choking her. While he is choking her, he is arguing with her still that, well, you hit me first. And she's like, fuck that. I'm taking the kids. I'm doing this. Like, fuck you. You're going to get arrested. So she's like heated, right? So now the problem is he feels like he's about to lose everything, right? After all of this, pursuing and chasing and forcing and everything, right? He's about to lose everything. Now he's not going to stop. In the midst of everything, her last words to him was that he was going to jail and he would become the loser that he always was. I mean, there's got to be some level of like some severe hatred between a couple that goes beyond the movie of the War of the Roses for that to be your last thing that you say to someone before you die. I mean, like, what the fuck, right? Like, how much hatred do you two have, right? And I wish I could say that this was the end of the adventure. It's not. It's not. It just continues to get stranger and stranger, right? Because I've been listing all these random occurrences, right, between them that's been happening in, like, different stages of their personalities. So now it's around 11 p.m. Verena finally gets home. She's coming in home. But the problem is Tara's dead because Steven wouldn't stop choking her. And now he realizes Verena's going to be home soon. I got to get rid of the body. So he wants to buy himself some time. He starts sending her dumb text messages so he, like, has more time. His wife's body is in the bedroom upstairs, a few feet away from the children, where they were sleeping. Thank God none of them got up. So Grant goes back upstairs. He drags her body all the way down the stairs. He admits that he was not able to carry her. So he just dragged her down the stairs. The stair opens up into their living room. He drags her into the dining room, then the kitchen, down a narrow laundry room, and then into the garage, right? Which is where he wants to take her body the most because he wants to put her body in the back of the trunk of a truck. And while he was doing all this, he was trying to get her into the truck. He actually dropped her because the belt he was using apparently to harness and drag her body across because he wasn't able to actually pick up her body broke. And he described the sound of her body hitting the pavement as what it would sound like for a watermelon dropping onto the cement. So he stashes her body in the back of her Isuzu, right? And which is a cargo a Jeep, right? He grabs the cargo liner, covers her body, and just as he finishes doing this, click, click, beep, beep, the sensors are going off right for the garage, which means Verena's home. He bolts back inside. Verena sees that Tara's car is right there. She goes, oh, Tara's home. The first thing Verena hears is Stefan's shouting at her. What the fuck are you doing here? Verena's startled. She's like, hey, Papi, I missed you. What happened? She's so surprised at him, but it's not what it looks like. He's trying to start to put together his story and goes, oh, I thought you were Tara. You know, we got to this fight. And he's just over-explaining, right? So Verena points out, well, Tara's car is in the garage. And then he's like rambling on about this fight that they got into and how she's going back to San Juan. She's going to San Juan for work or whatever for her boss in Puerto Rico a day earlier. And then he's just like that's just what happened. And then that's just the end of it, right? That was February 9th. February 10th, Stefan gets up really early to run errands while the body is sitting in the back of the Jeep. Now, the temperatures dropped down to the teens, which meant that the body, after it sets in with rigor mortis, was going to make things awfully interesting. He's planning everything around his story, that Verena believed his story and didn't ask any additional questions. But now he starts doing other things that said, guilty! Right? He calls up his friend, Brian Rellinger, really early, and Brian calls him back by 9 a.m. And he makes sure, like, he's starting to establish things, right? All the while he's establishing his story, we have this going on in the back end, right? Verena's worried that they split up because of her. Now she feels terrible. She feels guilty. She's all like filled with all these emotions. That she makes Stefan call Tara's phone 3 times separately because he wouldn't call her immediately. And she made him do so like in front of her. Like, I want you. So during these times, apparently he left her voice messages. Playing as the angry husband that has been deserted. His first call was at 2:17 a.m. that morning. Saying, Tara, it's Steve. I think it's after 2 by now. It's 2:15. I just want to know what the fuck is going on. I think you owe me and your kids, at least you owe a little bit of an explanation. Call me. Just call and let me know what the hell is going on. Click. He would leave several other messages. Aware that law enforcement would check voicemails, right? Because he's looking for his wife. His next voicemail. Hey, it's me. I'm just trying to find out what's going on this morning or today, or if you're still leaving today, if you're leaving tomorrow, or if you're planning on coming by. Just tell me ahead of time so I can make plans. Make sure the kids are here because they want to see you. Give me a call. Bye. It gets dumber. It gets dumber. And I hope I'm not going too fast because there's just so much like dumb crap. And if you need to rewatch it again, just sit down and be like, what the just follow with me. So he then begins unpacking Tara's travel pro suitcase, right? He does this to back up the story that he told to his teen lover, right? He says she took her other suitcase and his other one, so he begins to unpack it. Then he calls his friend Gary. And he's just like, right? So Verena notices he seems a little weird and less than affectionate. So she's like, I need to talk to my friend about this. So she talks to her friend Anna, who's already like a little suspicious about things. And I'm sorry, it gets weird. So when she comes back home, Stefan acts like everything is fine. He lays in Verena's bed and he decides that he's going to dismember her body. Now, what he doesn't know is that Verena has confessed to her friend, Anna, right? He doesn't know this yet. February 11th, 7 a.m. Bright and early, Stephen. He goes out to the garage, grabs a blue plastic tarpaulin to go into the back of the Isuzu backseat. He grabbed a Bosa Rubbermaid container, plastic garbage bags, plastic sheeting, and a pint of whiskey. He told Verena he had work to do and headed out. He then made sure to call his his father and his sister to make sure they weren't going to stop by the shop, because he had things to do. So he can cut her body up there. Okay, for those of you who may not be aware, this is where it's going to get a little detailed. Okay, now, first, he started with her wrists, and he struggled because the flesh is frozen, and he was like, man, this is a lot of work. It was much more difficult than he anticipated. So he goes back, he drinks more whiskey, and then he remembered he should have grabbed her briefcase because she never leaves anywhere without her briefcase or her computer. So now he's working on evidence to destroy, clothes, anything he can find. He's shredding things, burning whatever he's got, cutting up. Then he returns back to the next endless hours of dismembering her, right? He remembers that his father has a hacksaw, and he begins cutting the limbs off at the joints, right? Starting wrists, elbows, shoulders, knees, ankles, neck, right? In the beginning, he said he vomited, but he knew he had to carry on. And he drank more whiskey. And the way he motivated himself to finish dismembering the body was that he would go to prison for the rest of his life. Anyways, he was surprised, apparently, how little blood there was. And when he was done, he cut her body up into 14 pieces. He threw the pieces into garbage bags and a plastic container. And then just heads home, right? Because Verina's on her way home. She returns home like at 8 p.m. that night, you know? And he goes right back to being affectionate after he's cut up all her body parts, right? And he's like, oh, let's watch some TV. Right? He's caressing her, having his little heaven. Later that night, he's all having field day. And then February 12th, 3 a.m., Stephen woke up without waking up Verena, right? He gets dressed. He's sneaking around the house, right? He gets in the car. Backs out of the car, garage, really quietly, trying not to wake anyone. And then for whatever reason, he grabs a red plastic sled, which is later on deemed that it could have been belonging to one of his children. This is important because of... Let me just tell you what happens. Because he grabs the sled because he's making shit up as he goes along, right? He goes for an hour drive, goes to a spot that he's familiar with, gets to Inwood Road, parks the car, and then starts to kind of like head up, you know, in the twilight hour. And he begins to take everything out. And he puts it on the sled that he grabbed for no reason. As soon as he gets to the top, he bumps into, like, I believe a tree, and then everything starts, this is where it gets down, sliding down the hill, because it's February, with Tara's remains in it. He begins chasing down the hill after her body parts in the sled that he brought. He was afraid that someone would spot her, so the pieces started to go everywhere. He grabs her torso, he starts grabbing random body parts, just throwing it all over the fucking forest. He's grabbing evidence, blades, whatever. He just chucking things along. Like, it's not funny what he did, but it's just like, what the fuck, dude? He thought maybe just throwing all that evidence in the darkness, he wouldn't be found. I'm not done. He heads up back to the house, parks Tara's truck, and then loads the rest of the evidence in his car, the Jeep Commander. This is important. So he wipes down Tara's car, and then he goes and he has a family night with the kids like nothing happened with, you know, him and his instant teen mom, Verena, like, who notices he's becoming tearful and, like, really emotional. She's like, oh my God, he really misses his wife. And then he tells Verena, if you see Tara, there's a 9mm handgun loaded. So if you see her, grab the kids and get out of the house. Call the cops. Because I don't know what's going on in her head. I mean, which he wouldn't know more about because this idiot was actually still carrying her head. And her hands, her feet, and other body parts. Because apparently he didn't throw anything else out. He was just trying to find a permanent hiding place for everything. This time he heads back later on to the same spot, but goes in deeper. And then from there, he calls her phone again to leave more messages. He calls her supervisor later on. And like, hey, did she make it to Puerto Rico? It's like, no, she never did. And then he takes the blue containers and tosses them in a dumpster and scatters her evidence over 21 miles. Now, while he's out setting an easy game of Clue crossed over with an Easter egg hunt for the officers, Verena is now really worried about Tara because she's like, wait a minute. He said there's a gun. I should grab the kids and run. She knows I slept with him. She is panicking now. This teenager does not know what to do, right? So now she's like, Anna, remember that confession I told you? Can you please come over and have dinner with me? Stefan agrees that she can come over. And then as Anna is leaving, Stephanie immediately turns to Verena like, does she know about us? Verena lies. Thank God, right? Because we don't know what he would have done. That's all February 12th. February 13th now. Steve uses his shop's phone to call Tara's mom, and he begins to paint a picture about the fight that they had. And he's like, man, we had a big fight, and I'm having a hard time getting a hold of Tara. Have you heard from her? Mary immediately calls the rest of the family, tells his sister, and by 10 a.m., Alicia is pissed, right? That's her sister. And she wants to know, why didn't you go down to the police department? You so damn worried. I mean, don't get me wrong. Alicia and Tara had their clashing moments as siblings, right? But Alicia was like, nah, this is bullshit. You are a horrible husband, and you need to take your ass down there and fucking rectify this. Fix it. Apparently, she was just as scary as her sister. So, when he got off of work, he told Verena, oh, I gotta go I'm gonna go for a run. Because suddenly he's athletic. He left out the part that for his run, he was going to be burying the rest of the parts of Tara's body. He goes back to carrying her body, and the sledding, like what is with the rosebud sled? Like, I'm not understanding you. Like, it's so weird to picture a grown man using a sled to carry a body. I mean, never mind. I mean, it's obvious that this is a panicked man who's like all over the place, and whatever. I'm sorry. He starts telling his friend again, Martha now, who's another friend. He starts telling her another story, and he starts asking questions. He's trying to line it everyone that he speaks to the same story he told Verena, right? So now Verena comes home out of nowhere and that night, and he's like, I gotta report her missing. By the way, how do you feel about me? Like, I really need to know. Like, I need to know, like, now. Like, do you like me? And he just switches topics like that. And she's like, yes. And then he pushes the envelope going, are you in love with me? She doesn't really quite answer, but he persists, as he has shown that he will. Then he asks, are you falling in love with me? And she's like, maybe. He tells her, I love you. And then they go to bed. I'm hoping you're getting the feel of the chaoticness that he left behind the way I am telling this story. On Valentine's Day, Stefan reports his wife missing. And then it continues to trickle down from there, right? So he ends up being interviewed. Interviews are going on. And the detective, Kozlowski, ends up asking Grant, hey, would you be willing to come down to the department and just taking a lie detector test? And Stefan was like, yeah. So you think that means I'm going to be in trouble for any of this? Detective. What kind of trouble? I mean, I didn't have anything to do with this, And then apparently Stephen broke out into tears, like crying. Guilty. What a way to highlight yourself, right? So regardless of the information that the detectives had, there was some notes that they didn't check the family computer, but the truth is I don't think they could have, because I'm pretty sure they would have needed a warrant, especially because he's only reporting her missing and it's not really a scene of a crime. Obviously, they were going to stumble upon the evidence of the Easter egg hunt he left behind for them across the 21 miles. Yeah, I can't imagine how that conversation went with the detectives. Could you imagine being the detective? You're getting all the information, and then he's explaining to you the dumb Easter egg hunt that he went on. How do you look someone who's now he's going to jail? He's like, yeah, and then I carried her body in my child's sled because I couldn't pick it up. But, whatever. Mr. Grant faced first-degree murder and dismemberment or mutilation of a corpse for the alleged manual strangulation of his wife on February 9th, and subsequently was sentenced to 80 years maximum with a minimum of 50 years, meaning he'll either be dead or too old to get out. That's the story. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. But no, really, I know I was running through all that information rather rapidly, but I wanted you to see it the way how I saw it when I'm because this is all happening simultaneously at the same time. He's out there burying body parts, Verena's confessing to her friend on the side, then there's this person here, and he's trying to set, there's so much happening, even from the beginning of their relationship, right, where you see that he's adamant, I want her, right, back to his impulsiveness, and then you watch them develop from a confusing couple to her being really successful, maybe him being resentful towards her about her success, right, which is common for the patriarchy, right? Like, the man is me, man, I'm supposed to be the supplier, right? And then between all of that, their relationship is dwindling down, but no one quite knows when it began to dwindle down. They have the kids, they get a bigger house, and it's like there's just so much happening. And then they decide to sell the house, keep this house, and like they're going back and forth. Then they sell this house, and then they pick a fight with a random couple who doesn't even make as much money as they do, and they decide that they want to make them suffer. And it seems like the one time that they were together, it seemed like if they weren't headhunting other people, that's when they they were together. And then he's asking his ex-girlfriend, like, are you still married? And he's being, like, flirtatious with her on the phone. And then she's talking to her ex. Like, I mean, what was happening in that marriage? I mean, you can't say, like, oh, well, this led to this and that definitely led to that. Because the truth is, no one really knows what happens in a marriage, because those two clearly had no communication whatsoever, but they were both narcissistic. They were both so insecure that they needed to feel like that they were on top of the world. And the only way that they could do it was either by stepping on other people or stepping on each other, which is a very dangerous combination. I could see what Tara's family saw, because if she was headstrong and he was headstrong in two different ways, they're both narcissistic, it was bound to just be a bloody mess, you know? And it's just sad, because you can tell, like, this was just all leading up into one giant moment of chaos, and it's all so sporadic as the information's like being thrown at you and you're putting it all together, but that's what's there, and you're kind of just like, the fuck were you guys doing? And then whoever cheated first, right, that doesn't matter, right, because we're not getting the full details on everything on that, right? Because it seems like there's hints of it, but then this doesn't happen, and then there's hints of it, and then this doesn't happen, and then this one's suspicious, but there's no like, there's just too much shit happening, right? I'm upset with him for going to Verena for the revenge cheating. She's 18, 19 years old. She wasn't interested. You just kept coercing her over and over and wearing her down over and over, and that really is a thing that males do, and they really think it's, like, acceptable. Like, it's not rape, because you agree. Coercion counts as rape. Look it up. But his interest in Verena had more to do with Tara. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so upset that she left or was going to leave to San Juan in Puerto Rico. This was like War of the Roses on a darker level, and it's just kind of like, this was just bound to spiral out of control. And like, one minute he's concerned about like not divorcing because he doesn't want to destroy his kid's life, but then he kills their mom and then dismembers them and doesn't even leave them a proper funeral to fucking give her. Like, what happened? And then after he kills her, I'm not understanding the 21-mile evidence. Like, I don't get it. Like, what were you doing? Like, I'm really picturing a grown-ass man with a little sled, because he cannot pick up the body on a sled to get rid of the evidence. Like, I mean, no, really, picture it, right? Picture the same wagon, right, or sled. Think of like Snoopy, yeah, no, a little red wagon and stuff like that. Think of those old wagons and picture a grown man carrying it with a body in it up a hill, or chasing it down the hill because he lost control of it and is like, nope. I mean, like, this is like an animation cartoon, like, out of nowhere. You're just like, this isn't real. Like, that didn't happen like that. I mean, I've watched a lot of documentaries, and so far I've covered enough episodes, but I'm gonna have to say this is probably the quirkiest killing that I have ever come across. Do better this Valentine's Day, everyone. Please, do better. But yeah, please give me some feedback on what you think of this nonsense. I mean, it was evident that he, you know, there was guilt in him. I believe he did feel some kindish remorse, but I don't think it was that deep-seated, though. I think it had more to do with the remorse of getting caught and like what it would look like to his kids, because again, it's very important in what he looks like to others. And I think that probably had more of a crushing blow to him more than it would be the remorse of what he did for the course of his actions. I wish I could interview Verena and just kind of like ask her, like, how do you feel? Like, what are your thoughts? Because you have to remember, she's a 19-year-old girl and she's trying to like understand everything. She knows what she's doing is wrong, but she's also like in the middle of this course and her brain's not fully developed. Like, there's all this stuff like happening, and he's just trying to like reassure, like, everything's fine. And then only to find out all those nights he was cutting up wifey's body and then snuggling with you afterwards. I mean, that's gotta fuck with your head. But yeah. Happy Valentine's Day!